Wedding photographers of Reddit. What was your "they're not gonna last long" moment? At the rehearsal dinner, every toast to the bride was some euphemistic variation of, "I'm so glad you finally found someone to put up with your bullshit. They barely made it to the 6-month mark." Said this before. Third wedding and the best man, the groom's brother, starts his speech. "Well, welcome back everyone. Good to see some new faces and some old ones." When I worked as a wedding planner for a hotel chain, the groom had found out his bride was having an affair with her brother's best mate. The bride's mother knew about it, but insisted on the wedding and paid a fortune. The groom wasn't drinking much and at the speeches, stood up and revealed he knew and said he was getting an annulment. He then took his best man on his honeymoon. The honeymoon the bride's parents had paid for. It's not gay if you make the ex-mother-in-law pay. When the groom looked at her like she was the love of his life, and she treated the day like her prom and ignored him. I think they lasted 6 months. This was my wedding. He ignored me most of the reception and I had to drag him onto the dance floor, but even then he only gave me a single song. I kept going around the wedding looking for him, and when I'd find him he'd be in the middle of a conversation and I'd have to just stand quietly behind him because he wouldn't fill me in on what they were talking about. At the end of the wedding, we had a send-off moment where everyone made an arm tunnel for us and cheered us on our way to the elevator. It was cute, but I felt his hand slip out of mine and I turned around at the door to the elevator to see that he'd stopped a few feet back to talk to his friend some more. I looped my arm through his yet again. He didn't include me in their conversation and stood there awkwardly rubbing his arm to try to get his attention. When I finally managed to get his attention, I think I cracked a joke to the whole group about we have to go consummate the marriage or it isn't legal. See y'all at the after party. He raised his voice at me, saying that I was tearing him away from his friends. He had spent all day and night with his friends. I just wanted to take a turn. It was the most pathetic version of myself I've ever been. We lasted 4 years. Asked the groom in a recorded interview why he asked her to marry him and he said, "The pressure to get married." They lasted less than 2 months. Hadn't even finished the video and they were over. Went to a wedding during college to my friends that got married who graduated 2 years prior to me. They had a beautiful wedding on a boat off the Keys and as the best man gave his speech, he was really drunk by this point, just shouted out, "You don't deserve her. You literally got a blowjob from a stripper. No make that 2 strippers at your bachelor party. Peace out." He dropped the mic and tried to do a dramatic exit, but by this point we were all stuck on this boat in the middle of the ocean. It took an hour to get back to port and it was the most awful and awkward hour of our lives for everyone on that boat. Bride was such a monumental bitch. Her mom gave me a $500 tip for not walking out on the event when she was treating everyone, even her now husband, like a piece of shit employee. She did the whole clicking fingers thing when wanting someone to do something for her, and she berated the DJ for grabbing a sandwich when he'd been there for about 8 hours and was told that he should have brought his own lunch and she would be taking the cost of the food, like an open buffet style, out of his paycheck. They were divorced within 3 years, but not before having 3 kids that have stupid names. Having 3 kids that have stupid names. Deer Hunter. Go tell Jaden and Bronxana that dinner's gonna get cold. I met with potential clients to go over the details of the wedding and to see if we would be a good fit to work together. I tried to schedule something at a cafe, but they insisted on me coming to their house. When I arrived, there was a 5-gallon Home Depot bucket of dirty diapers on the front porch. I had a feeling this wasn't going to go well. A young kid, probably 7 or so, answered the door. All I could see and hear were children running around everywhere. The soon-to-be husband was sitting on his bed that was in the living room watching TV and the bride was in the kitchen with 2 kids on either hip. She told me to sit at the kitchen table to go over the wedding details. She shouted at her fiancé to come and join the meeting where he didn't acknowledge that I was there to talk about shooting their wedding. The bride was annoyed, then asked if I saw the bucket full of dirty diapers on the porch. I said that I had, and she said her fiancé has so many kids with other women that is the only place to keep them so they don't stink up the house. I did not take the job. I always wondered what happened to that couple. We are doing fine and have 2 buckets now. Not a photographer, designer. Red flags as follows: all different couples groom. When asked what his wants were, "I don't care, it's for her, as long as I'm in the lobby by 7:30 for the game bride. When asked about head table, "We need a sweetheart table or he won't sit with me." Excited groom asking questions. Bride, "Shish, you're being bad again. What did I tell you earlier?" Mother of groom, "When nut allergic bride asked for a nut-free wedding. Peanut butter cookies or no check. If accidents happen, they happen. Just pay attention. I cleared that check and forgot those cookies." Father of bride to groom during reception, "Your future with the firm is safe. If you had just graduated sooner you'd have gotten the pretty one. I almost threw up. First look." Groom, "This dress is awful. I thought you said you lost weight." The worst one ever. Caught groom making out with bride's mom. Ooh, finally one of these I can contribute to. My mother was a wedding photographer till I was about 18 to 19 and I helped out on many of them. The one that stands out the most was when we were at a campsite where both the wedding and reception were being held. About halfway through the reception I hear the groom start laughing maniacally. I peeked over his way and could see two groomsmen hauling the thrashing and screaming bride towards the lake. They threw her into the freezing cold water with her veil and dress still on. When she got out of the water I genuinely thought she might shoot somebody. Saying she looked like a drowned rat would have been an insult to rats. Her hair and makeup and probably the dress were ruined beyond repair. The fact that the groom laughed and didn't do anything stuck with me as being a dogshit move even as a teen. Apparently she thought so too because IRC they didn't even make it 6 months. That's one of the most horrible wedding stories I have ever heard in my life. Not just because they threw her in the lake, but also because depending on the weight of the dress, the cuts of fabric, and the depth of the lake, she could have easily drowned. I hope it wasn't a big, multi-layered dress. People have drowned that way. All that fabric soaks up all that water and gets super heavy and drags them down. If my groom did that I would set the marriage license on fire in front of everyone and send them all home. Also the whole cake is mine now. Bride looked visibly miserable the entire ceremony. While photographing the men's getting ready portion, the groom repeatedly kept joking about killing himself. During the toast, the bride ran off to the bathroom for about 30 minutes and came back wiping her tears with her eyes red and puffy. Neither of them had any chemistry at all. It made no sense why they were together to me. That was the last wedding I shot. Not a wedding, maternity photos. When the jokes about pushing each other off the cliff we were photographing on started sounding a little less jokey. They are co-parenting decently now after the restraining order ran out post-birth. When cutting the cake, she playfully got some on his face. He proceeded to grab a giant chunk and punch her in the face with it, several times hard. She was digging it out from underneath her eyelids bawling and her dad needed to be held back. Edit. A lot of people have been asking, so here is a bit more backstory. My guess as to why people were holding the dad back was that the groom was in full marine dress uniform and they used his sword to cut the cake. That sword was very much in arm's reach of the groom after this happened. So everyone was probably worried something really bad could happen if those two got near each other. After the incident, it was really awkwardly silent as the groom apologized to the family and if I remember correctly, this was 10 years ago or so, him and the dad went outside for around 20 minutes, then came back in. The rest of the reception went normally after that. Thor and the Hulk would not be able to hold me back if I watched someone do that to my daughter. If he was that violent in front of everyone, I'm terrified to think of how he treated her in private. Oh man, I was a wedding photographer for about 5 years. I get being awkward on camera and not wanting to do any public PDA. I'm very awkward myself. But when prompting couples for fun poses like whispering obscenities in each other's ear for a laughing shot, nuzzling close together, etc., most couples eventually let their guard down and enjoyed holding each other. It was so sweet. A few times though, I had couples that visibly didn't want to be near each other at all. Once the shot was done, they went back to standing a foot apart. They would complain about each other and make fun of each other in front of me. It always left me with a bad feeling in my gut and most of the time the marriage didn't last long. I think my first clue was when the bride showed up with some bad makeup clearly trying to cover her black eye, while most of the rest of the family seemed far more into the free food and booze than the wedding itself. Oh yeah, never paid me either. Classy people. Groom didn't want to participate in any wedding pictures after the ceremony. I believe he was more interested in drinking beers with his buddies. I don't think they lasted a year. I went to a weird wedding like this. It was my wife's high school best friend's wedding. My wife's friend in my opinion is a wonderful person, very caring and smart but suffers from a bad inferiority complex. She did the online dating thing for a while and dated this stereotypical rich dude from a waspy family. He was a corporate lawyer. Absolutely did not mesh personality-wise with her. Forgot to mention my wife's friend also came from a very well-off family, but she never flaunted it or fit any of the stereotypes of a rich person. So they end up getting engaged, and every time we hung out as a group, I would struggle to find topics to talk with the guy about because all they wanted to discuss was baseball and the stock markets, two topics I couldn't care less about. So at the wedding, which was held at this very fancy venue in our city, they did the obligatory religious ceremony, walked around together and thanked people. But once the reception was going on, the groom literally hung out with his frat brothers the whole time. My wife's friend pretty much stayed glued to my wife and her other friends, and they danced all night. The only time the groom peeled away was to do the first dance thing together, and then he literally went back to broing it up with his friends. I even pointed the out to my wife during the reception, and my wife tried to steer her friend to her friend's now husband, but he would see them approaching and yell out he needed to grab some drinks for the guys and disappeared. This is the worst part. At the end of the wedding, the expectation is they would leave together, right? Nope. The groom said he and the guys were going to go out around town so he could say a final goodbye, and he will meet his wife at the hotel later. I was fucking blown away at what a horrible fucking match he was. Her 3 kids from a previous marriage, 8, 9, and 12, were screaming their asses off and covering themselves in soda and overturning tables while making extremely hostile, profanity-laden demands for a drivable Hot Wheels car, and escalated to just randomly hitting people with baseball bats. Whole time mom was going, haha, aren't they so crazy? Oh, it's okay, they just get to express themselves. We unschool, lasted, a fake, somewhere between 4 and 5 months. What the fuck is unschool? Edit. Oh. I looked it up. It's just neglect. When the groom told the bride she couldn't have cake because she was overweight. Lasted a year. He gained weight. While shooting video, I attached a microphone to the groom for audio and proceeded to prepare for the ceremony. Just as I was about to adjust my audio settings, the groom stepped into another room with a friend. As I put on my headphones, I overheard the groom confiding in his friend, describing the wedding as a wedding of convenience and reassuring them not to be concerned about what would happen in their relationship. I know 2 people who had a wedding of convenience. He's gay, she's a lesbian. Their parents are Chinese, immigrants to the USA on one side, still in China on the other. They have a marriage that makes their parents happy, they're really good friends, roommates, and they do what they want on the side. It works, but the logistics must be intense. In another life, I worked catering shifts. Loads of Saturday weddings. I'll never forget the best man's toast of the groom. It was a shameless roast. He spoke openly about the groom's willingness to shag anything when he's drunk. He then went on and on about the groom's deadly gambling habit and his short fuse when he doesn't win. He asked the stone-faced groom, how many thousands of dollars in golf clubs have you destroyed or lost in countless pawns? Nobody was laughing. The bride had tears in her eyes and the groom's parents sat in stunned silence. Not a photographer, but I attended a wedding where the best man, the groom's father, gave a speech about how we don't agree but, insert groom's name here, will make his own decisions. Turns out the bride had cheated just a few days prior. The father knew about it, groom wasn't faithful either. Both are horrid people and I am so glad we cut them out of our lives shortly after their wedding. I've heard over and over that from others. The marriages that are more a huge extravagant party that burns money, correlate to marriages that are more likely to fall apart. If the wife or husband slams the other's face into the cake for a laugh even though the victim clearly isn't having a good time, it shows they don't consider the other's feelings. Taking pictures and the couple seems agitated at each other already and or don't seem to be enjoying the moment. Like, it's day 1 of your marriage and you are already angry in general. Weddings with lots of arguing between the spouses over details, people, events. Parents that are excessively involved in the wedding. I.e. mommy is going to be butting into this new marriage a ton. And one from me personally, I went to one wedding where one spouse secretly invited all their long-term exes to the event without telling the other. Wedding photographer from India here. Bride's mom dissed nonstop about the groom to a couple of our photographers. She believed that her daughter is too beautiful for the guy they promised her hand to and how she'd rather have him die sooner than seeing him with her daughter post the wedding. Bride and the groom had the first dinner separately because the bride wasn't just in the mood to have their reception dinner together. This is one as the final nail in the coffin post the wedding. When we were about to photograph portraits of the couple, the groom walked up to us saying that he's too tired from the wedding, so it'd be better if we could use the photos from the previous weddings we shot and morph his face onto those, and walked away. They divorced 3 months later. Cheeky smiley face. Not a photographer, but years ago, I was at my friend's wedding and she wanted pictures of her with all her bridesmaids, girlfriends. Her husband kept bombing our photos together, to the point where I have no nice photo of me and her together without him making some stupid face in the background. Marriage lasted just over 2 years. Months after the wedding, she lied to her husband and said she got a pay cut at work when she was actually stashing cash in a separate bank account. She left the divorce paperwork and a letter detailing everything in the bathroom sink and moved the next state over while he was at work. I never figured out why they truly divorced. I had my suspicions. There was a 9-year age gap and they started dating when she was 18 and married when she was 20, as I later got this information from him. He later confessed that he spent the entire day wishing he'd married me instead. We were casual friends, and his bombing of the photos was to make sure he had pictures of me and him all dressed up, even if his ex-wife was in the way. I haven't spoken to him since. My friend? Engaged to be remarried. The maid of honor very drunkenly said in her speech for the groom to call her once the marriage was over. A couple of her friends said that in their speeches actually, and the best man told the bride the groom's phone lock code in his speech because she was going to need it. Those two last maybe a year. The bride ended up moving states for a new job, which made sense to me after seeing how shitty her friends and family were during that wedding. The other couple I can think of had 12 bridesmaids, groomsmen each. Yes, 24 people just in the wedding party. Not including users, guest book attendant, flower girls, etc. The bride and groom belonged sorority, fraternity at the same school. That's why there were so many people. The bridesmaids, groomsmen had all dated each other and several of them had dated the bride and groom in college too, so it was a ton of fighting and drama the whole day. Those two lasted a while. I think 5 years. But the bride got pregnant on their honeymoon. I doubt they would have lasted a year if she hadn't gotten pregnant so quickly. Years after they broke up, I was invited to the bride's younger sister's bridal shower. They were family friends, and the Og bride got drunk on champagne and talked about how miserable she was planning her first wedding, and besides her daughter it was the biggest mistake of her life, blah blah, so that was fun. Edit. For the confused comments, the last bride regrets the marriage, not the daughter. Sorry, I should have been more clear. She regretted getting married to her first husband, wedding, but not having her daughter. The daughter is in junior high now, seems very happy and loved. The groom didn't want to put on his suit to take portraits even after the bride insisted because it's uncomfortable and hot. Different wedding. Saw the groom down an entire bottle of wine in one go when he finally had a minute to himself. I took the picture thinking it was just going to be a goofy moment, until later on while I was editing pictures, I realized what I was seeing. Oh wait, another one. The bride was 30 minutes late. When I was in the room with the bride while she was getting ready, she told bridesmaids how her sister drove her all around town because she couldn't make up her mind about if she really wanted to get married. The engagement session. The couple was in from out of town because she had just taken the bar exam to become a lawyer. At the end of the session, I gave them a prompt to share with each other what they were proud of each other for. He couldn't think of a single thing. Somehow they still got married, complete with the groom drinking 11 IP as several shots before the ceremony. Mother of the bride so drunk for family photos she pretended to strip, and the groom and all the groomsmen wearing camo hats with neon orange letters that said, "Titties and beer." For the entire wedding day. Including sunset couples photos where he refused to do anything I suggested, nearly spat chew right on my feet, kept farting on purpose, and loudly complained about how all he wanted was to go have sex. I'm a videographer and the groom called me a couple days after the wedding. He wanted me to make sure I didn't include any footage of him checking out the women at the wedding. I did a wedding for an acquaintance and her husband. Day goes great, I'm really happy with almost everything I took, everyone was feeling it and having fun. And this is one of the reasons I quit photography. The bride sees some of the photos I had sent her, and immediately is calling me. I need you to do the editing magic and make me look skinny. John was saying I was going to look too fat in my dress and wanted me to lose weight, but I knew you could just edit it, so haha I didn't. So I have to explain, this is like 2010. I can only Photoshop so much, i.e. I can make you look a tad slimmer in certain photos without making it noticeable. But I can't do it to all of them, and if I was to, the editing would be noticeable, and I will have to charge you a lot of money to edit you in all the photos. She tried to convince me to edit hundreds of photos for a couple $100, and I have other jobs going and had given them a great deal already, so explained I couldn't. So she insists I do at least some of her main pics. I tell her when people see the rest of the pics they will see the difference. She didn't care and insisted more. So I do, and a couple weeks later when I thought it was all done and history calls me and leaves me a voicemail of how I ruined her wedding. Her new husband is upset at how she looks in the pics and keeps making remarks about her weight. So didn't seem like they were in a great place from the get-go. I was a wedding photographer for 25 years, they were all pretty chill though. When I arrived at the venue and heard that the entire wedding party families were at the hospital, since the bride had fainted, hit her head, and had a seizure about 4 hours before the ceremony was supposed to start. We had time to kill, and I'd already been paid, so I hung around in case they came back. They did eventually, but before then, the priest, videographer, and I found a brewery down the street that was open and hung out for a few hours. The priest was a chill guy, but the videographer kept wanting to talk about how he didn't usually do weddings and mostly worked with sororities, making recruitment videos. He kept bringing it back up or forcing the conversation in that direction. I thought it was weird for a guy his early 40s to be that excited to talk about all the time he spent with teenagers, early 20s kids. And he said a few things that implied that that's how he knew the bride, and that was how he knew the bride. Figured it wasn't meant to last, but the guy seemed like a liar, so who's to say? The priest, videographer, and I found a brewery down the street. A priest, a photographer, and a videographer walk into a brewery. Why would a 40-year-old man be excited to be around sorority girls all the time? Honestly, I think sorority recruitment might have been a euphemism for illegal porn videos I'm trying to sell you. I'm a wedding photographer. Most of my couples are super awesome. Occasionally couples are grumpy with each other during photos and it's not a great look, but honestly, I like to give them the benefit of the doubt. Your wedding day should be a happy day, but sometimes it's just stressful. Stress can get to people and make them act in a way they normally wouldn't. I think the worst moment I witnessed was when a couple clearly didn't know each other very well. The guy made a comment about not knowing she had OCD during photos and her mom whispered behind me, "You have no idea." I have no idea if they're still together. Over coffee, at our initial "do they want to hire me" meeting. They argued bitterly the entire time and eventually, the groom just sat back in his chair with his arms crossed and wouldn't speak to either of us. I went home and the next day, emailed them the old something suddenly came up and that my schedule had unfortunately changed. Red flags aren't just for the people in the relationship. Vendors, see them and heed them.